Archaeology can be a complex, tricky job sometimes, but some archaeologists want some added challenge, like not being able to see, move freely, or breathe. This video is about underwater archaeology. Waterways have been of great importance for humans for the entirety of human history. Whether the ocean, rivers, or lakes, aquatic environments contain a great deal of food and allow for transportation faster than on land. They also act as an effective barrier to anyone without watercraft. Due to its strategic value, warships are an inevitable development. Thousands of years of use for food gathering, transport, trade, and war will leave evidence behind. Also, what is underwater now may have been dry land at one point, resulting in submerged settlements, resulting in underwater archaeological sites. Not quite. Yeah, that's a bit better. My point is, significant archaeological remains can be present underwater, and it takes specialist training and equipment to investigate such sites. I've always had an interest in maritime archaeology, and while I've worked on a few maritime sites, I've never done any archaeology completely underwater. Before an archaeological site can be investigated, it has to be located. Terrestrial archaeologists make use of resources such as aerial photos and LiDAR to find surface features, and then use geophysical survey techniques such as magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar to look beneath the surface. Underwater archaeologists need to use different techniques to locate sites. Sidescan sonar devices are towed by the surface vessel. They send out fan-shaped beams of sonar to build a digital surface model of the ocean floor. The technology was originally developed by the US military after World War II for locating sea mines. But by the 1960s it had been adapted for commercial use, where it was almost immediately used for archaeological purposes. Magnetometers are common remote sensing tools in both terrestrial and marine archaeology, and the most common type used in both areas is called a fluxgate gradiometer. They work using a pair of ferromagnetic cores wound with copper coils connected to an ammeter. The top coil reads a background reading from further away from the surface, while the bottom coil reads the magnetic signals at the surface, and the difference between the two readings will show any magnetic anomalies beneath the device. In maritime archaeology, the spread and resolution of this survey can be varied depending on the depth that the device is used. Near the surface it will give a widespread, low-resolution image. At the seabed it will give a narrow and a more detailed survey. The sort of things that magnetometry shows up really clearly are metal, burned objects, or bricks. Sub-bottom profilers use intense sonar bursts to penetrate beneath the seabed, creating a 2D image of the sediment profile under the device, penetrating easier into soft sediment and reflecting harshly off solid objects. The results are similar to those produced by ground-penetrating radar on a terrestrial site. Some side-scan sonar devices have sub-bottom profilers built into them. So you've located an archaeological site underwater, a shipwreck for example. How do you investigate it? ROVs, or remote operated underwater vehicles, are the underwater equivalent of a drone. Remote controlled vehicles with cameras that can be used to lay eyes on these sites. Ultimately though, underwater archaeologists have to don scuba gear and venture down themselves. Diving brings up new complexities. Breath regulation, buoyancy control, thermal insulation, limitation of movement, restricted vision, and of course, decompression sickness. I've never dived, so I can't go into any detail here for you, but suffice to say, if you dive down to a submerged wreck and realize you left the camera in the boat, it's a much bigger issue than if a terrestrial archaeologist leaves their camera in the truck on the other side of the paddock. Working underwater makes everything more difficult. Mapping sites, removing artifacts, any disturbance of the seabed can release huge clouds of silt into the water, blinding the divers. Artifacts can be winched up, guided up by balloon, or brought up using huge vacuums using the boat above, which can suck up sediment and artifact alike, to the surface where it can be managed much more easily. Artifacts that have been deep underwater may survive in a better condition than the same artifact on land. Anaerobic conditions, where there's no air to fuel chemical reactions or microbes that may break down the artifacts, are very valuable to archaeologists. However, as soon as an artifact is exposed to the air, their decay may become fast-tracked. The conservation of these artifacts is a worthy video of its own. You may have noticed that underwater archaeology requires a lot of expensive specialist equipment, and you would be dead right. This is what acts as a barrier to many archaeologists pursuing the subdiscipline, myself included. Now I'll provide some examples to show you the kind of amazing archaeological discoveries that have been found underwater. As an Englishman, when I think of maritime archaeology, I cannot help think of the Mary Rose. The Mary Rose was one of Henry VIII's great warships, a carrack launched in 1511. She saw action against the French several times until she was sunk in the Battle of the Solent in 1545, killing the vast majority of her crew of nearly 400. Salvage attempts were made shortly after the sinking, but it only succeeded in salvaging some rigging and some of the guns, and eventually the idea of raising the ship was given up on. In 1836 it was rediscovered, and salvagers made attempts to salvage valuables using explosives to blast holes in the wreck, and various objects were taken from it. Finally, in the 1960s, sonar was used to scan the shipwreck, and in 1971 it was identified as the Mary Rose. Laws were put into place to provide protection to shipwrecks from destructive salvaging, and fundraising began for this very expensive project, which meticulously investigated the ship. In 1982, the entire wreck was lifted from the seabed and conserved in the Maritime Museum in Portsmouth. Every time I've been there, it's been there being sprayed with polyethylene glycol, which I'll discuss in a future video on the conservation of waterlogged timber. But I understand that that process has now been completed, and the dry ship is now on display in a purpose-built museum completed in 2013. Thousands of artifacts were recovered, and the remains of half the crew. The anaerobic preservation of artifacts from the wreck has provided amazing information about the Tudor period that we had to rely on written documents for in the past. As someone who enjoys traditional archery, the longbows recovered from the wreck hold great interest to me. The Mary Rose was not the first great shipwreck to be salvaged whole and studied by archaeologists. That honour goes to the Swedish warship, the Vasa. The Vasa was a galleon built in 1628 and sunk on her maiden voyage in front of a large audience in Stockholm harbour. Like the Mary Rose, there were early salvage attempts, which succeeded in righting the ship on the seabed and removing many of her guns. In the late 1950s, the process to raise the wreck began, using pontoons and steel cables inserted under the wreck, and in 1961 the Vasa was successfully lifted to the surface. The ship was towed to the site of the current Vasa Museum, and as the wreck was conserved, archaeologists carefully excavated the inside of it, under quite unpleasant conditions. Imagine what it would be like working all day, being constantly sprayed with water, and in mud up to a metre deep. I can tell you from personal experience, anaerobic mud does not smell that great either. The Vasa is in much better condition than the Mary Rose. It was not devoured by shipworm, and even the pollution of Stockholm harbour aided to kill microbes that would damage the wood. I would love to see the Vasa one day, and it's definitely on my bucket list. Not all underwater archaeology is about sunken vessels. In some cases, entire cities have sunk beneath the waves. Heraklion was an Egyptian city founded in the 8th century BC, and served as an important trading port until it was lost beneath the waves in the 2nd or 3rd century AD, likely due to seismic activity. It's now located 6.5 kilometres off the coast of modern Egypt and 45 metres below the surface. It was discovered in 2000 by French underwater archaeologist Franck Goddio. The undersea ruins have revealed the remains of more than 64 ships, large statues, stone slabs and tablets, over 700 anchors, and smaller artifacts like coins. There are a number of underwater cities that interest archaeologists. For example, Port Royal in Jamaica, Dwarka in India, a good chunk of Alexandria in Egypt, Pavlopetri in Greece. I don't count Lion City in China, since it was deliberately flooded by the Chinese government in the 1950s for a hydroelectric dam. Good grief. I hope this video has served as an introduction to underwater archaeology. It's a fascinating subdiscipline with its own distinct challenges and rewards. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment and subscribe. Cheers!